guys, it's Lotus and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to continue on with our read-along of Erha. Let's jump right into it. Chapter 132, Shizun and Shimei. In the evening, as the birds were returning to roost, so too did the disciples of Shizun Peak make haste to Mengpo Hall after finishing their tasks for the day. Only Moran stood still by the practice dummies, as if waiting for someone. His relationship with Xuemeng had been much improved in recent years. There was much less animosity between them two now, especially after Moran had given him the top-grade spiritual stone to be inset into his Longchang blade. So Xuemeng turned to look toward him as he asked, "Aren't you coming to dinner?" "Not yet." Standing in the dusky light of the setting sun, Shimei was devastatingly beautiful, the afterglow making his skin look even fairer. Brushing back a strand of loose hair, he asked, "Is Aran waiting for Shizun?" Moran had already seen him at morning practice earlier, and when he had worked together with Xuemeng to repair the Heavenly Rift that year, he had noticed that Shimei was just about to outgrow Xuemeng back then too. But still, in this moment, with the sun setting in the west, the sight of him standing in front of Xuemeng still felt strange to Moran. Of course he didn't think that Shimei was bad-looking, it was just that he couldn't really put his finger on it. Moran didn't know what kind of feeling it was exactly. Maybe he was just too used to the way Shimei's delicate figure had always been covered up behind Xuemeng before, so he'd never expected this kind of role reversal. Moran smiled at Shimei and said, "Since I missed the banquet yesterday, I wanted to invite Shizun for a meal down the mountain as an apology, so I won't be going to Mengpo Hall today. You guys are welcome to come too if you want." Xuemeng and Shimei weren't used to eating together with Chuaning, so they looked at each other, then left. Moran had nothing else to do, so he crouched down on a large rock and plucked a foxtail grass to play with while waiting for Chuaning to come down the mountain. The setting sun was already a dark crimson, and the crescent moon was beginning to peek out from behind purple-red clouds when a person finally appeared on the bamboo footpath from the southern peak, walking slowly. That person had changed into a set of light robes in white and was carrying a cloth bundled in hand. He paused for a beat upon seeing Moran, and unease flashed briefly across his features. "I was just about to go looking for you. For something. What are you doing here?" "Waiting for Shizun to have dinner together." Moran jumped off the rock as he replied, still holding the foxtail grass and beaming brightly. "There's a new restaurant at Wuchang Town, and I heard they have a famous chef from the upper cultivation realm who makes really good pastries, so I wanted to invite Shizun to go try the place." Chuaning looked him up and down mildly. "Not bad. Got money to throw around now that I see." Moran grinned and said nothing. Chuaning humped and tossed the cloth bundle at him. Catching it, Moran asked, "What's this?" "Your clothes." Chuaning replied as he walked past. Hurriedly catching up to walk side by side with him, Moran said with a smile, "This robe's made of pretty good fabric, light but warm. If Shizun likes it, I can have it altered down to be smaller and—" "I don't want secondhand clothes." Moran faltered before the embarrassment hit him. "That's not what I meant. I saw Shizun wearing it this morning, so I thought Shizun liked it. That was thoughtless of me. I'll send someone to the store to have a new robe tailored." Chuaning asked, "Do you even know what size I wear?" Moran thought to himself, how could he possibly not know Chuaning's size? He could approximate the size of Chuaning's waist just by circling his arms, and he knew that if Chuaning stood on tiptoes, his chin would be at the height of his own shoulders. In the past, Chuaning couldn't help but bite him in the throes of passion sometimes, leaving two rows of teeth marks by his collarbone that wouldn't fade for days. Of course he knew the length of Chuaning's legs as well, legs that were so powerful as they wrestled, but so helpless when they wrapped around his waist, slim calf muscles quivering slightly, smoothly rounded toes tightly curled. And how could he possibly not know the exact width of Chuaning's shoulders, the full plump curvature of his buttocks? Chuaning for his part was pure as untainted snow and had no idea what he had just asked, thinking only that he had stumped his good disciple Mo Yu with this brilliant query of his. Oh dear, Moran is getting lost in his own thoughts, thinking back to his past life when he got to embrace Chuaning a lot, so of course he knows Chuaning's 3 sizes. Chuaning said with a sweep of his sleeves, "And how are you going to tailor anything without knowing the size?" ... Moran had nothing to say for himself. It's not like he could say that he did know, that his mind had kept drifting off to the way Chuaning's figure had looked yesterday while he was making Tangyuan earlier, strong and toned and well-proportioned even in the steamy air of the Miaoyan Springs, just looking as amazing as he remembered. and that his mind had wandered to Chuaning's thin, lightly colored lips, had thought about the way those lips had looked, stretched painfully around his own girth in the past as he'd been forced to swallow him, the spasming of his throat as he'd gagged. Moran, calm down! Calm down! Moran 2.0, stop! Down, boy! Moran closed his eyes, the jut of his throat bobbing as he'd mentally condemned himself a beast. Respect him. Cherish him. Don't have any more improper thoughts toward him. Respect him. Respect him! 2 deep breaths later, he'd managed to suppress the burning arousal, but the tangyuan had ended up a bit too big. Shizun would probably find them sticky when eating, so he'd thrown them out and remade them. 3 dainty little ones this time. Moran held them between his fingers contemplatively for a while, thought about those thin lips of Chuaning's parting slightly to take the sweet, sticky tangyuan into the soft warmth of his mouth. And the curl of that tongue was like a searing flame, igniting all of Moran's passions and desires, just about taking his life. He even knew the exact size a sweet should be in order to fit into Chuaning's mouth, but Chuaning had actually asked him, asked if he knew what size clothing he wore. The question lapped kittenishly at the inside of his chest. Not daring to think any further, Moran lowered his head and said, "Of course I'd ask Shizun for his size beforehand." Finding it a little odd, Chuaning shot him a glance. "Did you catch a cold?" "Nope." "Then why is your voice so hoarse?" Inflammation." After a moment of blank staring, something seemed to occur to Chuaning, because he suddenly turned his face away, lips pressed into a thin line and gloom congregating between his brows, but the back of his ears were flushed pink. The faint pinkness persisted all the way until they got to Wuchang town and sat down in a room with a view inside the newly opened Zhongchu restaurant before finally fading away. This was the first time Moran had earnestly invited Chuaning out for a meal. Although he'd done it before, those times had always been out of either necessity or exasperation, so the frame of mind was completely different. The waiter steeped a pot of Lushan mist and delivered some melon seeds and nuts before very respectfully taking out 2 menus written in bamboo scrolls to hand to the pair of cultivators from Sishang Peak. Moran flashed the waiter a smile as he took the scroll and said, "Thanks!" Chuaning lifted his eyes slightly to glance at Moran. This person never used to have a habit of saying thanks before. "Shizun can feel free to pick whatever he likes, but I recommend their sweet and sour mandarin fish with pine nuts, which I heard is both tasty and well presented." Chuaning nodded. "Then we'll get that. You pick the rest." Moran grinned. "I'll order according to Shizun's taste then." Chuaning said mildly, "You know what kind of food I like?" I do." He'd always known, he just never bothered to remember before. But from now on, he'd intended to never forget. He was still looking at the bamboo scroll when the sound of footsteps came from the stairs, along with the tinkling of the bead curtain. Then he heard the waiter's voice saying, "Ah, right this way, sir. The sirs you're looking for are in this room. Yes, yes, yes. They haven't ordered wine yet." The curtain of blue silk and agate beads were gently lifted by a smooth, fair-skinned hand. An extraordinary beautiful man with soft, inky black hair and a smile in his eyes that could chase the clouds from the sky appeared at the doorway carrying a pot of wine. Moran turned around and was visibly caught off guard before saying, "Shumei, what are you doing here?" "I ran into the sec leader at Mengpo Hall. He heard that the 2 of you were eating out here and was concerned that this restaurant wouldn't have aged wine since they've just opened, and so sent me to deliver a pot of Pear Blossom White to go with your meal." Shumei swung the wine pot dangling from his hand as he spoke. The cutely stocky pot was made of red clay and held in twined bamboo rattan, and the wine could be heard swishing inside with the movement, its sweet fragrance just about noticeable even through the ceiling clay. Shumei said with a smile, "Good thing I made it in time. It would have been a wasted trip if you already ordered drinks." Chuaning asked, "What about you? Have you eaten yet?" "I'll eat when I get back. Mengpo Hall will be open for a while yet. I have time." "You're already here, so just stay." Chuaning was a courteous person. "Have a seat and eat with us." I shouldn't put Aran to the expense." Moran smiled and said, "What expense? It's just a matter of adding a chair." He had the waiter bring out another set of bowls and chopsticks as he spoke. This Zhongchu restaurant really was quite fancy. Even the chopsticks used in the private rooms had threads of gold and silver inlaid into the tips, glittering and sparkling in the candlelight. Shumei took a seat and poured wine in luminous cups for each of them, the rich aroma of the Pear Blossom White immediately permeating the air. It was a familiar scent. In the past life, Moran had drunk it when Shumei had died, and again at all night on the rooftop when Chuaning had died. But they were both still alive now, and the calamity had already passed. Moran suddenly felt like all those things in the past, be it the possession or the affection, none of it really mattered anymore. What did matter was that the two best people in his life were still alive, and he could treat them to good food and good wine with the money he'd earned. This was enough. These drinks shared were worth more than all the lands he'd owned in the past. "Excuse me, waiter, can we get an order each of mandarin fish with pine nuts, stewed crab meatball, pork trotter aspic, cherry ham, 3 delicacy soup, and steamed pork and bamboo leaf, all mild, and then poached fish and hot chili oil, mapo tofu, beef tripe and chili sauce, and kung pao chicken, as spicy as you make them. For dim sum, we'll have shrimp dumplings, steamed spare ribs and taro with soy sauce, golden tripe with scallop, and chicken feet and soy sauce. And for dessert..." Moran glanced at Chuaning and closed the menu. "We'll have one of each." Dang, Moran, ordering the whole menu. I'm kind of hungry now after reading all that food. Without even looking up, Chuaning said, "We can't finish all that." Moran insisted, "We'll just take the rest back then." "It'll get cold. We can have Mengpo Hall heated up." Chuaning didn't feel like wasting any more breath on him. Moran was acting like one of those merchants that struck gold and got rich overnight. Way too extravagant. So he opened his own menu, looked it over, and said, "Just 1 order of kidney bean rolls, 1 order of leaf-wrapped sticky rice cake, and 3 bowls of tangyuan with sweet red bean taste filling. Thank you." The dishes were quickly brought out one after the other. Shimei liked spicy food. Chuaning couldn't take even a hint of spice, so Moran arranged the dishes separately, with half the table being light and refreshing, the other half being bright red and scrumptious, the colors complementing one another in a surprisingly appealing way. "Here comes the last one, our signature dish, mandarin fish with pine nuts." With the waiter's announcement, a plate of vibrantly colored and delicious-smelling mandarin fish in a thick stew was carried over by a pair of attendants. The fish looked like it was weighed at least 5 catties, fried to a golden crisp and plated in an enormous sky-blue porcelain dish. The fish was cut into flour-like slices of each thickness, with a thick, richly red sweet and sour sauce poured on top, and topped of sprinkling of emerald peas, pieces of Yunnan ham, and translucent shrimp. Just the sight of the dish could make one's eyes twinkle and mouth water. Chuaning's liked sweet things, especially sweet and sour things. Although his expression remained neutral as ever when the fish was brought out, even he couldn't help the twinkle from his eyes. Moran caught the twinkle. The waiter glanced at the table, and seeing there was some space in front of Shimei, went to rearrange the plates so as to make room for the fish there. But a pair of hands faster than his beat him to arranging the table. Standing up, Moran moved a couple of the meat dishes that Chuaning wasn't eating much from his own side of the table, then put a few of the tasty and spicy dishes in front of Shimei, leaving an empty space in front of Chuaning. Moran grinned at the waiter and said, "Go ahead and put the fish there." "Alrighty then." The waiter was all smiles, more than happy to have customers that would help make room on the table themselves, and immediately took the plate from the attendants to set down in the open spot before leaving with a bow. The arrangement had been done so naturally that anybody looking would only think that Moran was just helping the waiter out, but Shimei had noticed the hidden bias. Somewhat surprised by the gesture, lights flickered across Shimei's eyes for a long moment before he lowered them, looking a little upset. Oh no, is Shimei jealous? Shimei felt that Moran, having returned after being away for 5 years, not only looked completely different, but even the special attention that he once gave him seemed to have faded away a great deal. He liked mandarin fish with pine nuts too, so why did Moran put it so far away from him? Did he not know, or did he no longer feel the way he used to? Shimei well knew his own worth. His looks and his temper were both better than Chuaning's. In fact, very few people in the entire cultivation world were even in his league in terms of looks, but right now, he suddenly felt a little uncertain. He knew that, despite Moran's fickle and flirtatious behavior in his youth, acting as if he cared only about pretty looks, in truth it was all an act, and that, to Moran, the most precious thing was in fact the genuine sentiments beneath. If someone were to give him a tale of copper, he would repay them with 1,000 gold. Now that the bitterness born of past misunderstandings between him and Shizun had been dispelled, Chuaning's kindness to Moran was not something he could compare to. The thought brought a sudden chill to Shimei's heart, and he snapped his head up to look at the other two's faces under the candlelight. Oh dear, so does Shimei also have feelings towards Moran? I thought it was one-sided the whole time. One was drinking wine with his head lowered and his expression mild. phoenix eyes molten as water, lashes soft as mist, and the other was smiling as he watched the former, cheek propped up in one hand and eyes reflecting the candlelight. The reflection of that light held the snow of early spring layered upon an open balcony, pear blossoms blooming under clear moonlight, and the fluttering of those eyelashes were as ripples spreading across the mirror surface of a lake, sweeping across glittering stars untold with feelings that were probably unknown to even the owner of the eyes himself. In his moment of distraction, Shinmei accidentally touched his chopsticks with his elbow, sending them clattering to the floor. He snapped out of it and bent down to pick them up with a muttered apology, but then paused when he'd leaned over. The chopsticks had landed right next to Moran's boots, faintly reflective as they laid there quietly, waiting to be picked up. He could have just asked the waiter for another pair, but Shinmei never liked bothering others. Or perhaps, faced with such a downfall, even the most mild-mannered and laid-back person would feel a little bit unresigned, a little bit at a loss. Or maybe it was nothing so complicated. After all, a person's actions really were just a matter of a passing thought sometimes. In this moment, the opportunity just so happened to present itself, and Shinmei really did want to just know how much Moran still cared even for him now. And so, after a few moments of hesitation, he made up his mind and lowered his head, reached out with a fair, slender hand to go pick up the chopsticks by Moran's feet. The chopsticks had fallen too close, and it was completely natural and unavoidable that the back of Shinmei's hand would brush against Moran's lower leg as he retrieved them. Oh-ho! Shinmei is copping a feel, taking this opportunity to touch Moran's leg while trying to reach for his chopsticks? Okay, author's notes. When I'm rich. Moran, look at the main novel. Chuaning. Impossible. I spent a lot on buying various materials for machines and mechanisms. I cannot possibly have much money. Ye Wangxi. It is merely an external possession. As long as one has enough to use, it is adequate. Donate the rest. Mei Han Shui. Buy accessories. Wu chicks. Nan Gongzi. Do you think that being wealthy makes you happy? None of you understand the pain of a rich person like me at all. Shuemeng. When I'm rich, the first person I want to destroy is this dumb fool above. I am very willing to experience your pain. Come, give me your vaults. Okay, so to recap, in chapter 132, Moran and Chuaning go out to eat for dinner, and Moran orders all the foods that Chuaning likes. He remembers all of Chuaning's tastes. Moran also remembers a lot of things about Chuaning's body. He knows Chuaning's 3 sizes from first-hand experience, and but he's too embarrassed to mention that to Chuaning, so he's like, I found my ways of finding out your size. But yeah, he invites Chuaning out to eat, and they have a really nice dinner, but they get interrupted by Shinmei, who came bringing wine. So, as to not be impolite, Chuaning invites Shinmei to sit down and eat with them. Now Shinmei joins, but all of Moran's attention is on Chuaning and Chuaning only. Any food that Moran knows Chuaning likes, he puts in front of his Shizun, and so even Shinmei notices the preferential treatment and gets kind of sad, like, Moran, I thought you liked me. What happened? So right now, Shinmei is testing his theory to see if Moran still holds any feelings for him by dropping his chopsticks and trying to touch Moran's leg. So let's see how that plays out. Chapter 133, Shizun has the purest mind. Moran was just taking a sip of the pear blossom white when he suddenly felt something brush against his leg. He instinctively tried to move his leg away, but the contact became even more evident before he could, practically pressing against him as it grazed past. Oh, Moran, oh dear. Shinmei is getting really forward right now. Caught off guard, for a moment he couldn't even process what just happened, until Shinmei sat back up and saw the light pink flush on that beautiful face, the way he had his lips pressed into a thin line and his brows lowered as if there was something on his mind. Only then did Moran suddenly realize, just now, was that? Moran coughed and burst into a violent coughing fit. In his mind, Shinmei had always been as the untrodden snow in the spring, the new moon atop the branch, to be gazed upon appreciatively from a distance and to not be frivolously touched in any way. But although he loved Shinmei to death, and in fact would happily die for him, he'd rarely ever had any dirty thoughts about him, much less did anything of the sort in real life. Had this pure, untainted person just felt him up? The audacity! The thought shocked Moran to the core, and he shook like a rattle drum, horrified. Chuaning noticed and asked with a frown, "What's wrong with you?" Nothing! And right in front of Shizun too? Surely not. That didn't seem like something Shumei would do. Moran's expression grew more complicated by the second, but rather than it being an odd surprise, it was more of an awful surprise. Oh, so Moran didn't appreciate being felt up by Shumei. So as you can see, his feelings really have shifted. In the past, he would have been elated, over the moon for Shumei to touch him, but now he's kind of feeling bad about it. After a long moment spent calming his nerves, he heard Shumei call out lightly, "Waiter, excuse me, these chopsticks got dirty. Can I trouble you for a new pair?" The waiter came as called and left to fetch a replacement. Moran turned his head nervously, only to come face to face with Shumei's gentle, mild expression and the same calm gaze as always, as if he had imagined the bashful blush earlier. Sensing the eyes on him, Shumei lifted his own peach blossom eyes to look back at Moran with a subtle, barely there smile. "What is it?" Nothing. Shumei said, "The chopsticks landed at an inconvenient place right by your foot." Oh! Moran let out a breath of relief as he felt his heart settle back into place. He was overthinking things after all. He was going to chit-chat with Shumei some more to ease the atmosphere, but Shumei had already turned away and stood up to ladle out soup. Still feeling rather bad about the misgivings he had just now, Moran said, "Here, let me help." "That's all right, I got it." Shumei pulled back his sleeve as he spoke and calmly started ladling out the 3 delicacies soup for himself. Moran had put the soup there close to Chuaning, far from Shumei. It had seemed okay enough at first while sitting, but now that he had to stand up to reach, it really became apparent just how far away the soup was from him. He practically had to stretch his arm all the way out just to reach it from the other side of the table. 1 ladle, 2 ladles, slow and leisurely. Moran, ... Shumei said nothing when he met Moran's uneasy gaze, only smiled slightly before looking back down to continue ladling out his soup. Feeling a bit awkward, Moran waited for Shumei to finish ladling, then asked Chuaning if he wanted the soup. Chuaning said no, so he moved it to the middle of the table, not too close or too far from anyone, just right. His esteemed teacher and his favorite person. There shouldn't have been any bias in the first place. Partway through the meal, Shumei suddenly said, "Aran, you've really grown quite a bit, and you're no longer that disciple who used to make Shizun angry all the time. So since we're all here today, there's something I want to tell you, and an apology I want to make to Shizun." Seeing how serious Shumei was being, Moran gave him his full attention. "What is it?" "Do you remember the first time I brought you wontons?" Shumei said. "That bowl of wontons wasn't made by me. I never was any good at making those. It was..." Moran smiled. "Oh, that! And here I was worried it was something serious. I already knew, a long time ago." "Ah, you already..." Shumei's pretty eyes opened wide in surprise. Then he turned to look at Chuaning, who was minding his own business drinking his wine. "Did Shizun tell you?" "Nope, saw it for myself right before going to the underworld." Moran was just about to say more when Chuaning suddenly put down his wine cup, cleared his throat, and shot him a glance with a cool, stern expression. Moran knew that he had a thin face and didn't want others to know about his soft underbelly, so he said to Shumei, Anyway, I found out about the whole thing 5 years ago already. It's kind of a long story, so let's not go into it." Shumei nodded. "That's just as well." Then he turned to Chuaning to say, "Shizun, back then, when you didn't want to take the wontons to Aran yourself and had me do it instead, I didn't think much of it at first. But then, watching the misunderstanding between you two deepen over time, I felt terrible about it and was going to find an opportunity to clear it up with Aran. But every time I tried, the words never came out. I was being selfish, to be honest, because aside from the young master, Aran is my only close friend at Sishon Peak, and I was afraid that he'd be unhappy if he found out, so..." "It's fine. I did not say to tell him. You did nothing wrong." "Still, I feel really bad about it, because it's like I took credit for Shizun's kindness. Shizun, I'm sorry." Shumei dropped his gaze as he spoke, and then a moment later added, "Aran, I'm sorry as well." Moran had never blamed Shumei for that. Even though his initial fondness for him was due to the mix-up with Chuaning's wontons, Shumei had also been genuinely good to him afterwards, not to mention the fact that Shumei had only been doing what Chuaning had asked of him, not intentionally trying to take credit. Moran said in a hurry, No, don't worry about it. It's all in the past already anyway." He stared at Shumei in the light of the candle. It was a face he'd never seen before in the past life, because Shumei had already died by then, his life cut short, wilted before it could bloom, and became the sorrow of his lifetime. He didn't even get the chance to find out that, Ah, so this is what Shumei would have looked like if he'd lived to 24. Tall and slender, with a face that was fair as jade and a pair of warm peach blossom eyes that were clear and glistening. He looked so gentle that even his anger would probably be soft and mellow. His tightly clenched heart relaxed by degrees, and he secretly let out a sigh of relief, suddenly feeling very giddy, his heart feeling warm and settled. Compared to Shumei when he was 19, this 24-year-old Shumei felt a little like a stranger, no longer so intimate and familiar as they used to be. Oh, I didn't know that Shumei was 2 years older than him. Okay. Maybe this unfamiliarity was the very reason that a thought so ridiculous as Shumei was filling up his leg would even pass his mind. But Moran was sure that he'd get used to it in time. And, as for the matter of his romantic sentiments, he didn't want to force it anymore. Whatever happened would happen. He had wandered about for 5 years, hardly leaving a trail the whole time, and still had a couple of close calls. He didn't know if the fake Gochin had a hand in any of those incidents, but the fact was that the person behind it all had neither revealed themselves nor been caught. Moran was sure that there would be trouble down the line, and he knew better than to let his guard down. He was going to keep the 2 people beside him safe and sound, even if it cost him his life. And so, Moran set his heart at ease for now, but little did he know that the inner demon never rests, turning to another as soon as it relented its grasp on him. Maybe it was because of how he had originally... Maybe it was because of how much he had eaten at dinner, but Chuaning got sleepy soon after getting back. He had originally planned to work through the night to finish the blueprint for the new mechanism he was designing, but he only managed to get halfway through it before the yawns hit him. He tried to keep going for a while longer, but eventually gave in and, blinking sleepily, plonked into bed and passed out without even changing out of his clothes. It was a hazy sleep, and he dreamed of all kinds of nonsense. First it was the size ranking of the cultivation world's young heroes, then it was that firm-toned body he'd seen at the Miaoyin Springs. In the dim light of the candle, Chuaning's brows twitched into a frown, as if trying to free himself from the shameless dream, only to inadvertently sink deeper into it instead. And then, he had that dream again, the same one from before. A Sisheng peak that looked nothing like the one he knew, a loyalty hall that was and yet wasn't, and a grown-up Mo Yu who was grasping him by the jaw, looking at him with venomous mocking eyes as he said obscene things to him. He said, "Let me F you and I'll agree to your terms." This Mo Yu was a bit different from the Moran he knew. His expression was too crazed, his handsome face was too pale, and his skin wasn't tanned the color of wheat. "Get down on your knees." The disjointed words came in fragments from the depths of the nightmare, and it felt like there was something in his head that was just about to break apart, just about to break free of its chains and charge toward him. He felt a chill run down his spine, yet also for some reason felt inexplicably flustered. In his dream, he watched as Moran closed in on him and tore at his clothing, the sound of the fabric ripping clearer than it ever had been before. Then it all went black, like he was sinking into molasses. The dream cut off there, the same way it had countless times before, except that before, once the dream ended, he was able to sleep peacefully the rest of the night with no further disturbances. But today, for some reason, his vision gradually lit up again after that dream had ended. Chuaning tried to see, but the new dream was so hazy it was like looking through a layer of mist. He couldn't quite see his surroundings, only that it was scarlet everywhere. He couldn't see clearly, but his sense of smell and sense of touch gradually came back as the dream went on, became more acute than usual even. He was suddenly assailed by an indescribable heated arousal. He saw a toned body moving above himself, pressing down against him and rocking. Startled, Chuaning instinctively tried to struggle, but it was as if his body didn't belong to him at all. But to him... Wow, I cannot speak today, gomenasai. Startled, Chuaning instinctively tried to struggle, but it was as if his body didn't belong to him at all, but to the him of the dream. He could feel himself trembling, and he could hear the man's rough breathing, the hot puffs of breath against his ear, lips that kept brushing against the lobe of his ear time and again, but did not kiss him there, nor take his earlobe in to suck. He turned his head. He was lying on a large soft bed that creaked and rocked with their movements, and he could smell the musky scent of a beast pelt that seemed to be spread across the bed. He tried to reach out with a hand and grasp at the bed cover amidst the vague fuzziness of it all, but he didn't have the strength to move. The man was so vicious, holding nothing back like he wanted to tear him apart. He heard a moan ripped from his own throat, hoarse and strangled. He shook his head desperately, trying to struggle free, but that person had so much strength, as if he could crush him in his hand. Chuaning felt numbness spread across his scalp as his entire body shook uncontrollably. Maybe it was because the dream had been too realistic and too draining, but Chuaning slept all the way until noon the next day before waking up, and then spent a long time just lying there in bed staring off into space. And when he turned his head, it was almost as if he could still smell the scent of the beast pelt from that dream, musky and sweet. But then he blinked, and he was back in his black sandalwood bed in the Red Lotus Pavilion, and everything was perfectly fine, with nothing out of the ordinary. Except... Chuaning froze, then slowly looked down at himself. ... Yu Hung Elder, who rarely ever had any physical reactions after the years spent practicing asceticism due to his cultivation method, discovered that he actually, shamefully, had morning wood. Did all his years of ascetic training get eaten by a dog or something? And those dreams last night, what the hell was that? Why did he dream of such absurd things? How did it even happen? Surely not from just seeing Moran's body that one time at the Miaoyan Springs and then accidentally reading that trashy book with the truly awe-inspiring garbage. Chuaning can't stop thinking about that book. Chuaning's entire face darkened. He buried his face in his hands and rubbed vigorously at it, but it was still just as dark when he looked back up. ... Just what was wrong with him? Chuaning pressed his lips together and was just about to go take a soak in the cold lotus pond to cool himself off, but his toes hadn't even touched the ground when he felt a ripple in the barrier of the Red Lotus Pavilion. He had a visitor. Chuaning immediately paled and yanked the quilt over to cover up his lower half. That person walked fast, too, probably using light footwork. He heard 2 knocks at the door. "Shizun, are you up yet?" The voice sounded just like the one in his dream, except the one in his dream had been deeper and throatier, steeped in a fervent, bottomless lust. But the voice outside the door now was gentle and respectful, even a little worried, probably because of how late Chuaning had slept in. The sound of that voice seemed to smash through the wall between dream and reality as Chuaning leaned against the bed, clutching the quilt to himself. The voice of that person outside brought back the entanglement in the dream and the intense motions one by one, rousing passions into turbulent tides, making it even harder for him to calm himself. He was just about to lie back down and pretend to be sleeping when he heard Moran say from the outside, "Shizun, are you in there? I'm coming in if you don't mind." "I'm coming in?" It was such a simple, normal phrase, but it made Chuaning think of the way that man had lain atop himself in the dream, lips closing and parting, the way that masculine body had felt so hot he was sure he was going to get burnt. That person had said between pants, "Relax, I'm coming in." Chuaning's face burned red hot. He sat in bed in a daze with his clothes in a disheveled mess and a fire burning him up from the inside. There was ferocity and denial in his eyes, but they were like the gravel at the shoal, with sharp points that could ward people off in the bitter cold of winter. But once the snow melted into the spring and the tide rose, washing over the jagged edges with flowing, glimmering water, they no longer seemed half so threatening. He'd rarely ever been so mortified and helpless, and had practically never felt such intense desire before. Chuaning sat there in a dazed stupor, only snapping out of it when Moran pushed the door open to come inside, but by then it was already far too late to feign sleep. And so, the sight that greeted Moran when he walked in the door was that of Chuaning sitting in bed, the inky black hair draped loosely about him, a sharp contrast against his face like the radiant surface of a frozen lake under the sun. His eyes and brows looked even more stern than usual, and when he lifted his eyes, the look that he directed his way was like the cold light reflected off the frosty edge of a blade drawn just a bit. But there was a touch of red at the corner of his eyes, and so the cold light was tinged with allure and the ferocity was weaved with syringe, as if he'd just suffered at someone's hands, had unspeakable things done to him, his eyes filled with indignation and a glassy hint of wetness. Moran's breathing abruptly slowed down as he stared wordlessly at Chuaning. This man who was like a tender bud growing out of a thorny thicket. He felt like a heavy rock had been dropped into his chest, sending waves splashing high. Author's notes. Yesterday, an adorable cutie said that Shi Mei picked up the chopstick was like Shi Men Qing flirting with Pan Jinlian. So the question is Shizun Granny Wang or is he Wu Danlang? Mini Theater. How atrocious can the title of this novel get? Jinlian and his Da Lang Shizun. I fell in love with my little wolf dog, Granny Chu's autobiography. The plum in the golden vase and those things that happened between Da Lang and Jinliang. the reformed slutty wife of Jin Bu Huan, the handsome and charismatic Chu Dalang. I wonder what this is a reference to. Two adulterers from the plum in the golden vase, one of the most famous pieces of ancient Chinese smut from the Ming Dynasty. Ooh, ancient Chinese smut, okay. Pan Jinlian was Wu Dalang's wife, but was spurred by Granny Wang to cheat on and murder him with Shimen Qing. They also appear in Water Margin. Wu Song gets revenge on them for her brother. So Meatbun is referencing some Ming Dynasty smut, okay. So, to recap chapter 133, Shimei retracts his hand and pretends that nothing happened, but Moran is like, Shimei, my darling Shimei, felt me up? How could he? He's nothing like the guy I remembered from 5 years ago. But then Shimei's like, oh, sorry, I just dropped my chopsticks, don't think too much about it. And Moran's like, oh, of course, what was I thinking? I had to get my head out of the gutter. But yeah, they end up finishing their meal, and Moran is feeling awkward, but he's like, you know what? I'm just gonna focus on being happy with the two people I love the most in my life, Shimei and Shizun, and I'm not gonna think about dirty things. Nope, no siree. He's also wondering when the fake Gochen might appear again, because he hasn't bumped into him in the past 5 years, but he believes that Gochen is still plotting something, because of course he would, right? But yeah, after they're done with dinner, they all go home. Shizun goes to bed, and he ends up being pulled into one of the dreams from his past life, when he was Chu Fei and he was Ta Xianjun's concubine. And he remembers a lot. He's like, how could I be thinking about this, about my own disciple? I mean, damn, lust, go away. But yeah, he ends up going through a long dream of being intimate with Ta Xianjun, to the point that when he wakes up, he's completely frazzled and had slept in all the way into the late afternoon. And so Moran 2.0 comes to check on him, and he's like, Shizun, you slept in really long. Are you okay? I'm coming in. Chuanning's like, wait, I'm not ready yet. Because he woke up with some morning wood, and that has never happened to him before. So he's like completely embarrassed, but he's like, don't come in. But it's too late. Moran walks in, and Chuanning is sitting there in bed, looking completely out of it. And Moran's like, what happened? Shizun, you're looking very breedable right now. I'm sorry, but that's pretty much what Moran is thinking. He's looking at him like, please, only respectful thoughts towards Shizun. I cannot be thinking with my body right now. I must think with my mind. But yeah, both Chuanning and Moran are really going through it right now. One has discovered lust for the first time, and the other one is trying to hold back his lust. Who will win out in the end? Or will they both fail? Tune in next time to find out. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed today's read-along. Please do tell me if you think that Shimei is really suspicious, because the more I see him, the more I'm starting to have doubts about him. But, other than that, I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye!